Something strange happens to strong societies. They rarely fall when they are weak. They fall when they look invincible. That contradiction has bothered me since my younger days in the civil service, watching big institutions full of experts and competence crumble from problems they swore would never happen. It's the same pattern Ibn Khaldun saw 600 years ago. He said, civilizations die the moment they forget why they rose. Pose with that. Now imagine a rope, thick, strong, trusted. Over time the fibers loosen. Not suddenly, quietly, and the rope snaps at the moment people lean on it the most. That rope is asabiya, the strength of group feeling. It's what Ibn Khaldun believed was the hidden nerve, the unseen glue, the spine of every great society. But here's the real problem. Most people think civilizations collapse because of enemies, poverty, disasters, lack of technology. No, I've lived long enough and made enough mistakes to tell you the brutal truth. Societies collapse from the inside first, long before the outside delivers the final blow. Ibn Khaldun wrote that every civilization begins on the edges of the world, in the harsh places where life is difficult. People there develop hunger, discipline, loyalty, a strict sense of duty. They rely on each other, they fight together, they share pain. This is where strength is forged. But the moment these same people enter cities, when comfort enters the bloodstream, when luxury becomes normal, the story changes. You can picture it. A group of desert tribes, hardened by scarcity, conquering a rich kingdom. They win because hardship trained them. Then their grandchildren live in comfort, protected by the memory of struggles they never experienced. Luxury doesn't just soften bodies, it softens the will. Ibn Khaldun saw this cycle repeat for centuries. Hard times create unity. Unity creates power. Power creates luxury. Luxury destroys unity. And the cycle starts again. Think of it like a fire. At the beginning, the flames are strong because the wood is dry and tightly packed. But as the fire grows, the wood becomes scattered. The warmth makes people careless. Eventually, the fire weakens, not because the world puts it out, but because the fuel is gone. Modern people hate this kind of analysis. Too old-fashioned, too uncomfortable. We prefer the idea that progress is permanent and decline is impossible. But I've watched enough modern organizations rot from the inside. Petty rivalries, weak leadership, ego, entitlement, moral confusion, while outsiders waited patiently. Civilizations fall the same way. Slow internal decay, fast external shock. Ibn Khaldun warned that when people no longer see themselves as part of a shared destiny, the society is already in decline. Political fights, identity breakdown, mistrust, endless complaining, cynicism, loss of duty, these are not random symptoms. They are the early tremors of collapse. And here's the painful truth. No civilization believes it is collapsing when the collapse begins. Everyone thinks they are immune. People in comfort always assume comfort will last. But civilizations don't die like trees. They die like families, quietly, slowly, fighting each other over smaller and smaller things, until a stronger, hungrier group replaces them. This is the law Ibn Khaldun discovered, the hidden rhythm behind every rise and fall. And if you look closely, you might see signs of the same pattern unfolding today. In the next part, we go deeper. We examine the mechanics of the cycle, the psychology behind it, and the illusions that make strong societies blind to danger. Because knowing the pattern is the first step to seeing what most people refuse to see. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It drains the same way water leaks from an old clay jar, quietly, drop by drop, until one day the jar feels lighter in your hands and you wonder when the change even began. That's how civilizations decline. Ibn Khaldun mapped this decline with the precision of an engineer and the honesty of a man who had seen too much political chaos. He didn't blame fate. He didn't blame enemies. He didn't blame bad luck. He blamed patterns, predictable, recurring patterns built into human nature itself. Let's walk through the cycle. Stage 1. Hardship creates unity. In the beginning, people struggle together. Not the romantic struggle modern people like to post online, but real struggle, hunger, danger, cold nights, the threat of losing everything. Hardship forces cooperation. It also forces hierarchy. Someone must lead, and the rest must follow for the group to survive. Ibn Khaldun called this the stage of asabiya at its peak. Everyone feels responsible. Everyone contributes. Everyone sacrifices. It's the same chemistry you see in families that survived war or poverty. They trust each other more. They work harder. They waste less. They don't complain about inconvenience because they've tasted real difficulty. Psychologists today would call this high social capital. I've been called and simply called it strength. Stage 2, strength creates power. Once unity is strong enough, a group rises. They build institutions. They establish law. They create stability. But here is where the danger begins. When a society becomes powerful, its people start to forget the price paid for that power. They think the strength came from their brilliance, not their unity. They think their institutions are strong by themselves, not because the people inside once believed in something bigger than comfort. It's the same mistake we see in big companies today. The first generation sacrifices, the second maintains, the third destroys. I've seen this pattern in government, corporations, even families. By the time the third generation arrives, the mindset is different. What can I take? Not what must I protect? Ibn Khaldun said that after victory, leaders stop being guardians and start behaving like owners. And once leadership becomes about privilege instead of duty, the rot begins. Stage 3, comfort creates weakness. When people grow up in safety, they lose the instincts that built the safety. They expect things to work. They expect things to stay stable. They expect others to carry the burden. Ibn Khaldun observed that the grandchildren of conquerors inherit wealth, not discipline. They inherit security, not sacrifice. They enjoy luxury without understanding the heavy cost paid to build it. And once comfort becomes the new normal, even the smallest inconvenience feels unbearable. He wrote that comfort softens the heart, weakens the will, and dissolves the glue that holds a society together. Luxury doesn't just spoil individuals. It dissolves asabiya. People stop identifying with the group. They start identifying with themselves. Family over tribe, tribe over nation, personal desire over common purpose. The society becomes a collection of individuals living under the same flag, but no longer sharing the same soul. Stage 4, fragmentation invites collapse. By this stage, the society may still look strong on the outside. Tall buildings, big armies, loud displays of confidence, but inside, tensions multiply. People compete instead of cooperate. Trust evaporates, institutions become performative, rules become negotiable, and every group retreats into its own bubble. The rope that once held everyone together begins to fray. Ibn Khaldun said that when rulers start relying on outsiders, mercenaries, or paid loyalty instead of genuine solidarity, the dynasty is already dying. It's the same today when nations rely on systems, not citizens, on surveillance, not trust, on incentives, not shared values. A society held together by force is already past its peak. A society held together by fear is already in decline. A society held together only by laws, not loyalty, is weakening faster than anyone realizes. And then the final stage arrives. Stage 5, a hungrier group replaces them. Ibn Khaldun's hardest truth is this: civilizations are not destroyed. They are replaced by people who still have the hunger, who still have unity, who still have something to fight for. Just like strong muscles fade when you stop training, asabiya decays when a society stops valuing the old virtues: discipline, sacrifice, duty, honor, togetherness. The tragedy is that most societies only realize this when it's too late. When someone stronger, poorer, hungrier stands at the door, we think collapse is dramatic. But according to Ibn Khaldun, collapse is mostly quiet. A tired leader, a divided people, a confused identity, a generation raised without struggle. And one day, the rope snaps. In the next part, we confront the uncomfortable conclusion: what Ibn Khaldun would tell us today about saving a society that has grown too comfortable, too divided, too tired to see its own decline. And the brutal truth he left behind, the truth most modern people don't want to hear. There is a moment in every collapsing civilization when the people look around and ask the same frightened question: when did everything start falling apart? But decay doesn't announce itself. It doesn't march through the streets. It moves like rust, slow, silent, patient. By the time you notice it, the steel is already weak. Ibn Khaldun understood this better than any modern economist or political scientist. He believed civilizations don't die from poverty. They die from forgetfulness. Forgetfulness of discipline. Forgetfulness of duty. Forgetfulness of where strength truly comes from. And the hardest truth he offered: The truth we hate the most is simple. A society's greatest enemy is the comfort it cannot live without. Let that sink in. When a generation inherits wealth and stability without inheriting the character that built it, their first instinct is to enjoy the fruits, not protect the tree. They assume the garden keeps itself alive. They assume the walls defend themselves. They assume the system will run forever on autopilot. But nothing in human history runs on autopilot. Not families, not nations, not civilizations. Everything decays and must we fight the decay. What would Ibn Khaldun say if he walked into our world today? He would look at modern societies, wealthy, distracted, cynical, divided, and he would sigh the way old men sigh when they see someone repeating a mistake they've warned about for years. He would point to our polarization and say, "You have wealth, but no unity." He would watch our politics and say, "You have leaders, but no loyalty." He would observe our culture and whisper, "You have comfort, but no cohesion." He would warn us that a society obsessed with individual freedom, but allergic to collective duty, is a society drifting toward its final chapter. And then he would tell us the one thing most people today refuse to hear. Strength comes from sacrifice, not from comfort. So how does a society save itself? Not by chasing technology, not by blaming outsiders, not by changing laws faster than it changes hearts. A society saves itself by rebuilding the one thing that makes it strong in the first place. Asabiya, the willingness to carry a shared burden. In practical terms, that means people choosing responsibility over convenience, communities choosing cooperation over ego, families choosing unity over petty conflicts, leaders choosing service over image, and citizens remembering that freedom without duty turns into decay. Strength returns when people return to each other. I've lived long enough to know that progress is fragile, comfort can be corrosive, and the decline of a civilization doesn't begin with enemies at the gate. It begins with individuals who no longer feel connected to each other. The brutal truth: there is no final stage of human history, no permanent stability, no guaranteed prosperity. Civilizations are like living organisms. They grow, they strengthen, they soften, they fracture, they die. And new ones rise from the ashes. Ibn Khaldun offered no comforting promises, but he offered clarity, the kind only an old man who has watched empires rise and fall can give. A civilization is strongest when its people believe they belong to each other. And it dies the moment they stop. That is the law. The hidden rhythm beneath all human history. And whether we like it or not, that rhythm never stops. Some ropes can still be repaired, but only if we notice the fraying while there is still enough strength left to hold the strands together.